You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 363.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? As always, hope you're doing well. I am recording this in the middle of August, and I just finished an epic week of training inside Recipe Week Live 2025. It was a wonderful opportunity to meet many of you who are wanting to write recipes, better recipes, more original recipes. And I did a little poll inside Recipe Week Live 2025 because I was kind of curious if we're writing recipes for family cookbooks or if we're writing them for our business or if we're building a business. And by and large, the results of the poll showed that you all want to write cookbooks related to your business. Many of you are food, culinary professionals, nutrition professionals, and writing a book that you can sell for profit is one of the things that you are interested in doing. Not that your family couldn't enjoy this book as well, but the primary motivator wasn't just a legacy family cookbook. Many of you who took the class and many of the students inside the class, the goal was profit. Selling a cookbook and making money off of it, earning royalties. And I think this is a really good thing to know before you head into a cookbook project, because there's a difference in the way that we think about the cookbook and perhaps a difference in the way that we get it published. So today I want to share with you some questions that you guys have had based on Recipe Week Live 2025, many of the questions that came up during the course of the week. And I thought that this might be helpful for those of you that weren't able to attend the week to kind of hear the kinds of questions that other cookbook writers have and to get my take on these things. So first of all, one of the things that came up a couple of times, and I'm going to summarize this here in the first question, is about recipe adaptation from other sources, other recipe writers, other cooks, other cookbooks, and how we credit the author. Now, this whole question came up on the day that we talked about recipe copyright law. And the most important thing to know about recipe copyright law is that a mere idea or a list of ingredients or a basic description of a process is not generally available or eligible for copyright protection because it's just a basic idea, or it's a basic list of ingredients, or it's a basic process. There's so many of these types of foods out there, everything from pancakes to scrambled eggs to vinaigrettes to a basic formula for a quiche, the custard that would go into a quiche, bread, basic hydrations for bread, how much flour, how much yeast, how much salt, how much water, maybe the ratios for sourdough starter. There's just a lot of things that are basic processes and ideas. So no one really owns those or can have a copyright protection on those basic ideas or processes. This is why Coca-Cola, Kentucky Fried Chicken, anybody else with a proprietary mix or list of ingredients and a spice blend or something, they don't disclose that because there is nothing that would protect their list of ingredients from someone else using them in their product or for sale or in their cookbook. These things cannot be copyright protected. But what is protected based on something called the idea-expression dichotomy is that we can protect our work, we can help it to be copyright eligible by adding more to it than just the basic process or the basic list of ingredients. We can add life experiences. We can add stories, tips, history, write everything in our own words, express everything in our own words, and truly make a recipe our own by writing everything in our own words. I use the example in the class of if everybody here listening was given the task of making a cranberry gelatin salad, for example, and we all were given the task of developing it, writing it, and sharing our printed version or our digital version of our recipe in a group, every single recipe would be different because we all expressed how to make this salad in our own words and in our own way. Now, short of somebody plagiarizing or copying a recipe word for word, which is never considered ethical or allowed, the recipes would all have their own expression. And that's because we are all different people. We're all coming to the table and experiences with cranberries and making gelatin, all completely different. Plus, when we're writing recipes, we're writing for an audience of people who can use our recipes. So we would even perhaps have a difference in the recipe based on the audience we're writing for. Are we writing for children? Are we writing for teens? Are we writing for young adults? Are we writing for experienced cooks or bakers? Are we writing for professional chefs? Are we writing recipes for people to use at home or in a professional kitchen? There's so many variables about our audience that even just that fact alone could change the way the recipe is written. So the question then is, how do I adapt a recipe if I have been inspired by a recipe in my kitchen or something I read or a question about, how do I adapt these things so that I'm not copying someone else? Well, the first thing is that just remember the list of ingredients and the basic process is not copyright protected, but your expression of all of those things is what is protected. So the first thing you want to do is express everything in your own words, including all the ingredients and all the instructions, following the style that you have set forth for the way that you write your recipes, including whether you're using imperial measurements or standard measurements, whether you're using abbreviations or no abbreviations, and the way that you write everything out. You also want to make it personal. You want to add stories, tips, reasons for your technique, history, sourcing notes. Basically, what's your kitchen wisdom related to this? Never copy it word for word. And if you feel like you still want to disclose, not if you want to disclose, but if you are concerned that this recipe still doesn't deviate that much from the original, you can ask for permission from the publisher to use their recipe, or you can change up the process completely, or you can actually just say, if everything's expressed in your own words, that this is adapted from or inspired by a recipe that I read, and really giving simple, honest information in the beginning of your recipes. When people buy a cookbook, they want to read your take on things. They want to know that you have cooked everything that's in this book. They want your voice. They want your judgment. They want your lived experience. They want your recipes. And that's what makes a cookbook copyright protected, is the fact that these recipes are all an expression of the author, bound in a book, and they're tried, true, developed, written, and tested recipes. So specifically, someone in the class asked about a recipe where they were curious if they could just change the process and not necessarily the ingredient list. Even though ingredient lists are not generally copyright protected, I still say that you should express it all in your own words. You should give credit to the person who inspired you to create this recipe, especially since it's a similar set of ingredients, but you're going to change up the process. So in short, ethics of recipe writing say that we don't copy anyone's work word for word. We always give credit where credit is due, but we know in the back of our mind that even our own recipe ingredient lists and our own basic processes that we maybe include in a cookbook, because they're not copyright protected, someone else could use them as well. They could use them as a recipe for their own book. They could use them perhaps as was done in the blog Julie and Julia, where she cooked through the whole entire book and she posted her results on her blog. And also, there's nothing to stop anyone based on copyright law from perhaps cooking something out of your book, using it as a foundation for a physical product that they might sell as a caterer or personal chef or as a food business. So that's kind of a roundabout way to say that you need to do everything in your power to express everything in your own words. And if at the end of the day you've done all that and you're still concerned that you have not disclosed perhaps who you were inspired by, where you got the original recipe from, you should go ahead and disclose that in the head note of your recipe. Okay, question number 2 is about cookbook writing being hard. And what's the shift from just learning about cookbook writing to actually doing it? And the biggest difference is the application of the knowledge. In the online world today, and with social media today, and even listening to podcasts, passive learning is very enjoyable. And I would almost go so far as to say that we have become a society that is very strongly connected to, if not addicted to, passive learning. We love all the how-to information that is out there. We love all the how-to videos that we can find, even short videos about how to do things. We're hoarding and we're saving a lot of this information because we're just passively learning it. I bet if you went and looked at all the maybe free downloads you've signed up for, and listen, I'm talking about myself just as much as I might be talking about your experience. But if I go into Dropbox, every year I start a new folder in Dropbox so I can look back to my 2023 folder, for example, and I can see all the workshops I created that year, downloads that I created that year, but also any programs that I participated in, courses that I purchased, or free downloads that I took advantage of based on what other people are offering. So this is all passive learning until we make the decision to say yes, to make space in our calendar, in our brain, and apply what we have learned so that we actually are making progress on what it is we have learned about. So an example of this is I've been thinking about doing some sewing and making a gift for my family and some people in my life for Christmas. So it would require me to go onto YouTube, for example, or try to find a course about sewing and making this particular item. And I could do all of that. And I could totally learn how to do it, even buy a course, pay money, invest money in learning how to do it. But until I go to a fabric store or somewhere where fabric is sold and I buy fabric and I get out my sewing machine and I thread the sewing machine and start to sew, everything is just passive. There is no engagement of me with my sewing machine to finish what it is I learned about. And it's much the same way with learning about writing a cookbook. Passive learning about writing a cookbook or writing recipes feels very comfortable, but the action that we need to take to write our recipes, to develop our recipes, to have them tested, to publish them in a cookbook takes a lot of courage. And it also takes a shift where you give yourself the gift of time. You take small steps to make progress toward your goal. And that's the hard part about being educated, or the hard part about learning is the application of what we have learned so that we get closer to the result or the goal that we have set out to do and that the teaching that we have received would lead us to. So in Recipe Week Live 2025, I taught all about recipe copyright laws, development, writing, testing, and publishing. And it was a great week. But the way that we all learn from that week truly is to take what we have learned and to turn it into action, to work on recipe development, to start keeping track of what we do. I have a tool I use called the pre-recipe tool that we're using those to gather our ideas for a recipe. When we write recipes, we start from a blank page and we start to actually put words on the page. We're saving various versions of our recipe. We're having things tested by other people. And then we're taking the steps we want to take to get these published in a cookbook. So it's the hard part is the yes to ourselves, to carve out space on our calendar, to take the time for our own dreams, and to put what we have learned into action. That's where the discomfort comes in. And that's what we need courage for. It's not for all the passive learning that we do. It's for the application of what it is that we have done. The interesting thing, though, is once we start to take action on what we've learned, we don't feel as much resistance. We feel resistance mostly when we have a goal we want to accomplish. We've learned the how to accomplish it, but we don't do anything with it. That feels horrible because we know that we have spent maybe money, we've spent time in learning how, but we don't take any steps. The momentum trick is to start taking steps toward the end result, learning along the way, completing little bits at a time, getting tiny wins, sharing it with the community if that helps, and then actually doing it is what teaches us how to actually finish, okay? The actual action steps that we take. So I'm big on learning from classes, courses, but also from doing small repeatable actions that you commit to taking courageously and confidently to build the book that you want to write. Okay, and then question number 3 was about pricing for cookbooks on Amazon. And I thought this was an interesting question because I started talking with my students about recipe publishing and prices that I and some of my students have charged for our cookbooks on Amazon. And the question was, are people really willing to pay $25 to $30, $35 for a cookbook? And let me talk about this in a couple ways. First of all, in the cookbook space, it's not uncommon to see new premium print cookbooks that range around the high 20s to $40, sometimes even a little bit more. So that kind of sets the standard for what cookbooks might sell for. And self-published print cookbooks can also sit right alongside those prices because they deliver clear value like other cookbooks do. All cookbooks are teaching tools. All cookbooks have a repeat use resource, which means that you buy it once and you can use it over and over again. There's tested results and tested recipes in there. There's ways to save time in the kitchen. There's ways to become more confident as a cook. There's ways to learn about different cultures, perhaps. There's stories for you to engage with based on what the author wrote about. So there's so much value that's inside a book that if you self-publish and you want to be sure that you're charging the correct amount in order to cover your costs and to have some profit for yourself at the end, remember that we talked in the beginning that a lot of the people that came to Recipe Week Live 2025 wanted to sell their cookbooks for profit. So just knowing that, Amazon does offer a print cost and royalty calculator if you want to publish on KDP, and you use this calculator to put in the specifications for your book, what the trim size is going to be, which means what are the dimensions of the front or the size of the book. Is it 8.5 by 11 or 5 by 8 or 6 by 9? You can set your specifications for the book. You can tell the calculator how many pages you want to have in the book, what kind of paper you want to use, and if you're doing black and white or if you're doing color printing. Sometimes we might see books on Amazon that we think are going to be cookbooks that are less than what we might charge, but maybe everything is in black and white on the interior. Maybe there isn't a ton of story and it's just recipes. Maybe the value that was added by the author just isn't up to snuff, even though they maybe only charged $10 for the book. Most of my students can find a pretty healthy margin if they price their book in the mid to high 20s or in the $30 range. It's important that you, in particular, remember if you're going to print in color, and the page count is going to, of course, bump up the production cost of the book, and that you can actually make the price of your book something you're very aligned with through the usability of your book. You know that it's very usable. You know that all the information in your book is correct. It's a very valuable book based on images or diagrams or call-outs or sidebars that you put in the book. It's also very purposeful. It's maybe a teaching tool talking about history or heritage or sourcing food or seasonality. Your goal is to obviously help someone have more confidence in their kitchen, whether it be with menus or pantry frameworks or shopping lists, and that you have designed it in a way that's easily readable. It makes sense. There's a nice index to follow, and it really does offer solutions for your audience. So if all those things are true, and we have a cost calculator in KDP to help us price our book, then the only difference then sometimes between a $15 book and a $25 book would be the amount of profit that you decide you want to take whenever a copy of your book sells. And I think it's important not to get wrapped up in some sort of shame about this, or to get wrapped up in that you don't deserve any profit from the book, because that's not true. If you are truly creating a cookbook to generate profit or a revenue stream, first of all, you need to own that. You need to be proud of that. You need to be so happy that we have the capacity to have a business where we can do that. You need to make your book as valuable as you can and charge it at a price that is the signal to what the cookbook teaches, how it guides people, and how it helps them in the kitchen. Price is a signal of that. It can be a signal of a very high quality book that's really going to help them. So what we might pay for a book, or what we might pay for a fiction book or a black and white interior like a novel or even a nonfiction book, isn't always the same as what we might need to charge for a cookbook. Again, because it's color, because of the time involved in putting the recipes together, and things like that. So just remember, the people do spend $25 to $40 on cookbooks on Amazon. Make sure if you're looking at prices, you're actually talking about a cookbook project. And just know that the way that you price your book is a signal to the valuable information that's in the book and all the things that you have created in that book for the user of the book. Okay, so that is it for some of the questions that came out of Recipe Week Live 2025. Again, when it comes to recipe development and testing and writing, giving credit where credit is due, and a little bit of summary there about recipe copyright laws. Then also I talked about the link between passive learning and active doing, that by doing things is how we actually apply what we learn. And that's the hard part of any project, is the doing part. And then the third thing we talked about today is pricing that you're comfortable with, that you're confident is a signal that is really about helping people see the value in the book, meaning that it becomes easy to charge $25 to $35 up to $40 for a cookbook that you have written and published. If people are shopping for the lowest price book anyway, it might not be someone that you're interested in necessarily buying a copy of your book. We don't want to price our work, and it's not a race to the bottom. This is a way for you to really signal to people the work you've put into the book, the time you've put into the book, and the value of the book itself. So if you are interested in learning all about how to publish your recipes in a cookbook, a polished print cookbook on Amazon. My program, Cookbooks on KDP, is starting in September. So this is a new cohort of this class. There's live instruction, live coaching, and video-based instruction where you're going to learn how to organize your content and format your recipes for printing and publishing on Amazon. So if you're interested in learning more and you're ready for structure, momentum, and support, I encourage you to join the waitlist for Cookbooks on KDP. There's a link below in the show notes, or by heading over to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/KDP 2025. Leave your name, your email address, and when the doors open, you will be one of the first people to learn about any special behind-the-scenes early bird bonuses or bonuses to get you to enroll in this program. So that is it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.